Yo, and welcome to Beyond the Cot, the F3 Knoxville podcast, streaming live from Knoxville, Tennessee, where we focus in on connecting and growing the men of F3 Knoxville and beyond in all three F's: fitness, fellowship, and faith, and also center in on calling out the champion in every single man that posted F3, whether that's here in F3 Knoxville, here in the state of Tennessee, or anywhere in F3 Nation. We want to call out the champion in you. So you'll hear from our guys here in Knoxville, you'll hear from guys in Tennessee, you'll hear from guys in F3 Nation about the authentic lives they are living as high impact men, and as we get to do this crazy thing called iron sharpens iron together, not only in F3 but also beyond the cot. What are the three elements of community?
The three elements are mission, oneness, and fellowship.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Beyond the Cot, the F3 Knoxville podcast. This is the first podcast of 2021, first episode of 2021, so an exciting time. And here with me today, pumped to share that we have the man, the myth, the legend, the person who brought the Cobra exercise to the big ball AO many years ago, Daniel Anders, aka Soot.
Well, thanks for having me, Steam. It's been good. I'm looking forward to this.
So a fun little backstory on this episode as well is we have tried to do this episode I think 2 or 3 times, and the reason we did not last time is because I got my days wrong, and because I thought it was a different day, and I was like, oh shoot, man. So we have been talking about this episode for a while, and we have some really cool stuff to share, but I'm glad we can finally do it. Yeah. So we're finally here, exactly. which is good. Sure. So tell us a little about, I guess, what we're going to talk about today, kind of what you're going to share today, and we'll just kind of dive into maybe your F3 story.
Yeah. So I figured today we'd talk about the second F, fitness, fellowship, and faith. To me, fellowship has really been the most important F of the three. I mean, it's obviously pretty important if it's in the name of what we do. I figured we'd just talk about fellowship and community and how stuff ties together.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Now, for the fellowship part, so what we're 9 days into 2021, right? And it's probably gonna look a little different than it has 2020, or I'm sure we will dive into this later on as well, but the whole fellowship part, especially for guys in F3 Knoxville, has been okay. Let's go grab lunch and let's maybe meet up for a cold one after work or something like that. But I think what we are going to try to do is take that deeper.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, we'll take a look at fellowship throughout history. I mean, really, we're going to be digging in some into Scripture, some into the Bible. We'll kind of look at the picture of fellowship that the Bible shows us. There's a lot of good examples in there. We'll pull out some principles and some elements of fellowship, and then we can look and see how we can scale that down to multiple levels, from our workplace to F3 to our families to our neighbors and so forth. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump in then, and we'll get to kind of the Soot story of F3 at the end of the episode, because I'm pumped. Just jump in and hear what you have to say, and dude, let's do this thing. Yeah, so I'm really excited to hear this. So fellowship, like you mentioned, fitness, fellowship, faith. So fitness is obviously that magnet. Why guys come out? They're going to get a good workout to F3 or in F3. Fellowship is kind of that glue, or what draws guys back. Yeah, they're getting a good workout, but then they realize, oh, hey, wait a minute, I'm getting something else out of this. And so there's some kind of stickiness to the fellowship part of what we do. And then faith is just being like, hey, I'm not living for myself. There's something more than just me existing on this earth. So when you think about the fellowship portion of F3, that second F, and how that ties into how we work out, how we do stuff inside an F3 circle and outside of a COT or a circle of trust, I guess, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, like I said, fellowship is the glue. I mean, it's what keeps people coming back. When people think about F3, obviously fitness is the first F. So it draws people in. People are like, cool, I'm out of shape. Maybe, especially coming around January, I've got all these New Year's resolutions that I need to fulfill. So
let's dive into that a little later.
Yeah. So it's kind of easy to sell. It's kind of easy to sell the fitness part. But hey, we'll come work out. And most guys have played high school sports, or they've been in some sort of arena in life where they've physically exerted themselves with other men, and they kind of see the value in that. So it's not a hard sell. But what happens when you start focusing only on the first F, then you start to lose people, right? Because people are like, oh, I can get a better workout if I join the CrossFit gym, or I can get a better workout if I do that. And while that's a true statement, F3 is not F1 for a reason. There's a fellowship and a faith aspect to it. And that's why fellowship is the glue, because people come for the workout, and they're good workouts, but they stay for the fellowship, because that camaraderie is what it's all about. Right? Having a brother to the left and right of you, somebody you can depend on. After a while, you start meeting up outside of the workouts, and really, that's kind of been the whole mission of F3 from the beginning. The way I understand it is that we were trying to build men up in the community to raise the entire community up as a whole. Yeah,
like this idea of planting, growing, and serving small workout groups for the invigoration of male leadership in the community. I like it. F1. We are not F1. We're not just fitness. Yeah, right. That's cool. I mean, F1 is. Yeah, I mean it's F3, right? So, so when did you start to know, or I guess notice? Because you've been in F3 4 years.
It's been about 3 years. It was late January 2018, so about 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. So when did you start to know, besides like, hey, it's really cold outside, and I'm doing this crazy thing called F3? When did you start to know, oh man, there's some cool fellowship aspects of this too, that kind of, what you said, exceeded beyond just the workout?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit into my F3 story, I started coming to the big ball January 2018. It was me and my buddy Stagehand, so shout out to Stagehand, Eric Thompson. We were friends, and we would get together on a regular basis and just talk about life, stuff like that. And I guess it came to a point where we were thinking, Eric was like, I want to get in shape. He had some goals, and of course I'm all about it too. I was like, yeah, man, I'll do whatever. We can work out together. And started tossing around some ideas, just saying maybe I'll join a CrossFit gym, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And I was like, well, you know what? I heard about this thing called F3 from you, actually, because we had a couple classes in college and we kind of known each other before. Yeah. I was like, hey, my buddy Dan, Dan Henson. I was like, he's a part of this thing called F3. It seems kind of cool. I've heard a little bit about it. I was like, why don't we, before we do something crazy, let's just go check it out. I hear it's free. Right?
Before you drop like $400.
Yeah. I was like, before we make any rash decisions financially, or commit, making a massive commitment to something like that.
Locked in for 46 months.
Yeah, let's just go try F3. And so me and him went together. We were F&Gs together down there at the big ball. I think you were queuing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it was pretty fun. And then from there, the rest of that semester, me and him, I'd walk over to his apartment and get him, and then we walk down to the big ball together. And so for me, that fellowship aspect really started with Stagehand, and it was something that we could bond together over. We'd meet up early in the morning and walk down there in the dark, and then hang out with you and the other guys. So it was a lot of fun. So I guess that is where I first started seeing the impact of fellowship. And of course, throughout my life, I've known that community is important, and I've been through seasons where I've had a lot of community and seasons where I've had not a lot of community, and definitely see the impact of that. So so that's a little bit of my story.
Well, and it does something for you as the bringer, or as the person inviting someone into that space as well, rather than obviously, Stagehand, awesome dude. We've done a lot of rucks together, but it does something for you inviting someone into that space as well. Just like I was like, hey, you want to come to F3 one day, and then you get to turn around and do that to Stagehand, which is cool. And so, what did that solidify for you about F3? Because you were pretty much working out with ROTC, right? And you had a pretty hardcore, solid workout regimen. Yeah. I imagine, right?
Yeah, it was alright. I mean, so I guess one thing about me and Stagehand going together, it's always it's always awkward being the FNG, but it's less awkward if you have other FNGs with you.
There you go.
So that was kind of my thing. I was like, I heard about it, and F3 wasn't something that I was like 100% on board on before I showed up. But when I had someone else who I thought was like, this is something that maybe you would benefit from, and then it's also something I would benefit from. Why don't we just go together? So I guess from the beginning, fellowship was there between me and Sachin as we're FNGs together. Definitely makes it a little easier.
You got named together.
We got named together and everything, so less pressure off being the only new guy. But.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and you've actually been a part of 2 or 3 different regions of F3.
Yeah, a couple. Yep. Yeah, so I started out here in Knoxville. After that, I went up to F3 Capital region for a couple weeks up there before I went to Virginia because I commissioned in the Army and I had training down in Virginia. So spent a couple weeks with F3 Capital, really great guys. Shout out to them. And then throughout my time in the Army, it's been kind of difficult to plug in with F3 just because of work demands. But I got stationed out in Fort Carson, Colorado. So shout out to F3 Colorado Springs. All those boys out there. It's a tight group of men, and I've really enjoyed my time with them. This was a lot of fun. And then now, I'm down in the Columbia, Lexington area, South Carolina, so getting plugged in with them when I can, meeting a couple guys down there. But F3 Knoxville is my home. Big Ball is my home AO, so there's nothing will ever beat that.
Yeah, and it's probably been pretty cool to see how fellowship is structured in different regions and before we get to that, I got to share this story about the first time you queued.
Oh, yeah.
man. Okay. And Soot's laughing because he knows where I'm going with this. But so the first time Soot queued, it was at the Big Ball, obviously.
It was like a week after I first showed up.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I think you got named on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then Saturday you're like, all right, here we go. I was like, all right, man, that's awesome. So you just jump head in, and I love it.
Don't waste time.
That's a word right there. Thank you for coming to the podcast. That's it. But the first time he queued, we run down to UT, so like a hop, skip, and a jump away from Big Ball or the World Square Park. And lo and behold, here are these just massive logs that are beside this building that you had prepped before. Yeah. So one, a good queue preps before. So shout out to queues that prep. But we did log carries all around the University of Tennessee, like the entire campus. And I think we had a couple FNGs that day too. And so I just want to say, if you've never queued before, that is the standard. Your first queue, if we're not carrying logs around somewhere for a good 45 to 50 minutes, check yourself.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. And I was like, man, this dude is serious.
Yeah, the logs never touched the ground the entire queue. So
no, they did not. Okay, so where'd you get that idea? Like, what was you're just like, this sounds really hard and really fun.
I had access to some logs, and I was like, you know what? Just have a fun time. It was probably inspired by some of the workouts I did in college, ROTC. We just pick up a bunch of heavy stuff and run around. So that was kind of a spin-off of some of those workouts I've done. Yeah.
That's funny. I always remember that. Just kind of like, man, I will never forget. So it's first queue.
Yeah, and I think some of us had rucks on too. So.
Oh, even better. Yeah. Why would we not? Right.
Why would we not?
It's like of course. Like, it sounds really dumb. Where do I sign up? So that was his first queue, which is awesome. Okay, so since you've been traveling around to different regions and you've kind of gotten experience F3 in different parts of the country and in world, when you think about fellowship specifically, like, let's zero in on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Where does your philosophy on fellowship, or where the second F and F3 come from, and I guess where do you pull your ideas and heart into that?
Yeah. So first of all, I believe we are all designed for fellowship. So firstly, we're designed for fellowship with our Creator, and we are designed for fellowship with each other. Just that's part of my belief, and I see it every day. And I think every interaction I have validates that view that I hold. So I guess what community and fellowship means to me, I pull a lot of it from Scripture, from the Bible, so I guess we can kind of dig in there and look at a picture of community. All right, so in the beginning, if you guys have read or have any familiarity with the Bible or with church, you guys are probably familiar with the story of Adam and Eve and how God created Adam and Eve for fellowship. Really, it was so he could spend time with his creation. He gave them a purpose and he gave them a mission while they were walking around in the garden, and they just really enjoyed fellowship with each other. And that's kind of what the ideal was in the beginning, right? Now, obviously, we messed up, right? Adam and Eve sinned, and we fell, and we were broken out of that fellowship for a time. But God does not give up on his promise and his intention. So if you follow the story a little bit further in Genesis 12, God calls Abram out, and he says, there's this whole fiasco called the Tower of Babel. Everybody tries to get together and rebel against God, long story short. So God scatters them, confuses their language, but he chooses Abram out. And he says, through you, I will make a great nation. He's basically saying that through Abram, he will redeem all the nations and bring them back into fellowship with him. So this is God's idea this whole time. He designed us for fellowship. He created us for fellowship with himself and with others. And now, through our rebellion, he's trying to redeem us and pull us back in to his original purpose. So he calls Abram. He says, I'm going to make you a mighty nation. Of course, if you're familiar with this story, he has ups and downs and periods of rebellion. He has a kid with his wife's slave Hagar, trying to push God's hand before God's hand was ready. But anyways, that story follows all the way through down to Israel. If you look at Jacob's story, and same thing with Jacob, he's rebellious, he's a deceiver, he's kind of a little scoundrel. He doesn't treat his brother all right. So you see this picture of broken fellowship, but yet this is still the line that God is choosing to redeem mankind and bring it back into fellowship. So in spite of all this brokenness, God is still working. So he confirms his promise with Jacob and the nation of Israel in Genesis 35. And then, you got the whole Old Testament. Israel is rebelling and repenting and rebelling and repenting. They have good kings and bad kings, and they fall. And all that leads to Jesus in the New Testament. Because God is a faithful God, he does not give up on his promise. Despite our failings, he sends Jesus to come. And Jesus is really a fulfillment of his promise to Abraham, where he says, I will redeem you, or I will redeem the nations through you. So Jesus comes, and now Jesus is bringing a new community, the kingdom of God. He's saying, hey, no longer are we all separate from God, but now I'm providing a way for you to come back into fellowship with the Creator. And he's showing a picture of what fellowship with each other is really all about, and that's kind of where we can kind of pull a lot of principles from in our conversation today. So Jesus comes and he establishes his church, right? You study his ministry in the Gospels, and then when he leaves in Acts, at the end of the Gospels and into the beginning of Acts, he establishes his church. His disciples, his closest friends were there to carry on his mission. So that's kind of the theme, and really that's where we are today. So, if you hold to believe that the Bible is truth, then we see this thread that now we are part of that church age that was initiated with Jesus coming down and establishing his kingdom. So now you can really see a picture of community, and we can pull some principles. So first thing in this kingdom of God community that Jesus brings is that he gives this community a mission. All right, so if you look in Matthew 28:18 and 20, it says, Then Jesus came to them and said, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So the first thing you see Jesus give his community is he gives them a mission and a purpose. So that's the first. There's three elements we'll hit up. First one's mission. You can't have an effective community. You can have groups of people together, and it can be a good time. But if you don't have a purpose or mission, that's not a community. So that's the first aspect.
And it said that's a suggestion in there? Oh,
no,
commandment. Okay.
It's a command. Yeah, Jesus gives his community, his followers, his kingdom, a command to go and make disciples of all nations. That all nations is the theme calling back to Abram, where he says, I will redeem all the nations through you. So now you see this thread of God redeeming humanity through Abram, through Israel, through Jesus, and now through his church. Right? We're called to continue building His kingdom and bring people and invite people into the kingdom of God. All right, so the second element, so mission is the first element of community. The second element is oneness. If you were at my Q last week at the Big Ball, oneness was kind of a theme that we talked about there. But we'll just pull one example from 1 Corinthians 1:10, and Paul says to the church in Corinth, he says, "I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought." So the second element to a strong community is oneness. Right? You got to have similar values. You have to have a similar mindset. And I think in F3 you see that. Like you see, it attracts a lot of guys with similar values, like guys who want to better themselves, want to better their families, want to better their communities. And so, this first thing is mission. Second thing is oneness, and the third thing is fellowship. This is where the second F ties into the bigger picture of community. So in Acts chapter 2, it talks about what the fellowship of the early church looked like. It said, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." So right there you see some sub-elements of fellowship, right? They continued to grow in knowledge, so they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They committed to expanding their minds and learning. They committed to being together, so they had fellowship. They committed to eating together. One of the best ways to spend time together is over food.
This is true. Very true.
They ate together. They prayed together, so they were vulnerable with each other. Right? How can I pray for you? How you can pray for me. They shared struggles together, and they also praised God together. They had a common purpose and a common theme, and they chose to spend their time praising God and really living out worship. So those are the three elements of community, as I see it. One, a good, strong community has mission. A good, strong community has oneness, and a good, strong community has fellowship, just being together and living life together.
Man, wow. That's it. That's
a wrap.
That's it. Thank you.
No.
Man, okay. So, wow. I don't know if I've ever heard that theory before in those words. But I like that. So obviously F3 has a mission, right?
Yes.
And I think we as men and we as women as well, I mean, people in general, like, what is our mission? What is your mission? What is my mission? I think that's something we're all searching for, right? I mean, obviously, in F3, we have a mission. I mean, we plant, grow, and serve small workout groups for the invigoration of male community leadership, right? Yeah. And then our oneness, I want to go back to that because I thought that was really good too. Because I think it's easy for us to be like, our mission is we're going to rock hard for 45 minutes in the gloom, which is the manifestation of the first F, right? But like our mission goes obviously far beyond that in F3. But this whole idea of oneness, the first thing that came to my mind is, okay, so you and I could go to F3 and be totally polar opposites. Yeah. But we are going to work hard for 45 minutes together.
Yep.
You know, how do we still maintain that oneness just like we do inside the cot or the circle of trust, as we should outside the cot as well?
Yeah. So that's a great thing about this concept of oneness. I think it's so easy to think of oneness as like, oh, we're just all the same. We're all, exactly the same demographically. Like our history, our backgrounds are all the same. But the key to strong community isn't diversity for the sake of diversity. In fact, we pull this principle of oneness from the early church, but the church is the most diverse group of people on the earth. And that's kind of what Jesus' intention was, to redeem all the nations, right? So it didn't matter if you were Jew, Gentile, it doesn't matter what country you were from, what language you spoke. The purpose of the early church was to draw everybody into one mind and one thinking. That was to glorify God and share the gospel of Jesus, that he came and established this kingdom, and now you're invited into this kingdom. So this idea of oneness is essential for community, but I think we can see it so diluted with today's movement in like diversity for diversity's sake, or inclusion to the point where we are inclusive of sin. But oneness, what makes a strong community is a oneness of mind despite our differences and despite our diversity, not because of our diversity. So that's, wow. Yeah. I mean, you can have a million different people. Let's think about a football team, right? So we have people from all different backgrounds, different places, and maybe they have something in common. They all go to the same high school or something. But, in order for them to succeed on the field, there has to be a oneness in mind. They have a mission. The mission is to win the game, but they have to have a oneness, and that oneness is like, hey, we're going to play 60 minutes, full speed. We're going to play with tenacity and aggressiveness, right? Yeah. If you have, or even the fact that like, hey, our oneness is we're going to operate. We're going to execute this play to the best of our ability, right? If you have people on the field and one of them's like, yeah, we're gonna do a screenplay, and the offensive lineman's like, nah, like I'm gonna go run downfield to the goal line for no reason. And the wide receiver's like, well, I don't even want to play. I'm gonna sit on the bench. You can see how that team falls apart.
Tennessee balls?
No. But you see how like you have diverse people, right? A million different positions, different jobs, but they all come together for one mission, and they come together with one mindset. And that's what a strong community is. It's not, we take all these diverse people and we bring them together and we unite them with a oneness, with the same mindset in a way. Yeah. And I don't know if that makes sense, but we all have the same goals and ambitions. If I think about F3, we have people from all over Knoxville, all over the world, really, that can come together into one AO, and they're all there with a similar mindset of, I'm going to get better today. I'm going to push my brother next to me to be better today.
Man, Captain Crunch had something the first episode, and he actually shares this frequently, just in his life. That is his ministry, being Captain Crunch, right? Of, when people show up in the gloom, I don't know where you come from. I don't know what you went through, where you were last night. I don't know your beliefs, but all I know is that you showed up to get better. That's the only thing I know about you, if I don't know you outside of F3 already, right? And the only thing I know is that you're going to toe the line with me for 45 minutes, 60 minutes on Saturdays, or under a ruck or whatever it may be. And so that's your oneness, right? I mean, your mission is clear, your oneness is there. And that's easy to do inside of F3, but for the most part, I'd say, because it's a hard cue, but once we leave the cot, once we leave the F3 circle, so what we call going into your sphere of influence, your family, job, your relationships, your platform, your ministry, whatever that is outside of F3 that you do, that you are called to do, and that like is your mission outside of F3, it can look different, and I think we're seeing a really hard manifestation of that coming out of 2020 and going into 2021. So even in F3, right, like you have guys that are on the left, that are on the right, that don't want anything to do with any one of those things, right? And so we have people that are totally different. How do we maintain that oneness without seeing the this is what you stand for, so that means that we are not one, or that means that our oneness is not compatible anymore, just like we were inside the cot.
So I think those differences are important, because that's what makes us who we are. But what makes us a community is that we do have a similar mindset, and most likely the person in the gloom next to you, is probably, you're going to disagree on stuff, and that's how life is. Yeah. But during that time in the gloom, you guys are there for the same reason. You guys are there with the same motivations, for the most part. And I say, like, you may get one or two. There may be one or two guys that show up and their motivations are completely wrong, and usually those guys don't come back, or whatever the thing is. But that's super rare, and usually those guys come with the wrong perception of what F3 is. Maybe they're coming thinking it's F1 or whatever. But, So I mean, and you're seeing a world now that is, there's so much emotion being enticed. Like we're enticed to be divisive, and there's so much out there in the world that we can consume or we can view, and it stirs up these emotions, and it dehumanizes people, and we think now that so and so is our enemy, when in reality, the Bible teaches that our enemy is not flesh and blood. Like our enemy is not the man to the left or the right of me or standing across from me. It's not other humans. But yet, in the world today, we see so much that's just trying to divide us. It's like, oh, look at that person, like X, Y, and Z. This is why you should hate them. This is why you should hate that person. When that's totally counterintuitive to the mission of the church and the mission that Jesus gave his disciples. Right, go make disciples of all nations.
Yeah.
I do want to point out one thing, that you can have mission, you can have oneness, and you can have fellowship in a community, and that community could be completely evil. All right, so it can go the wrong way. So there's one underlying foundation, and the foundation of all strong community is morality and truth. I just want to go back to Romans 12, where Paul tells the church in Rome, he says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. So that is the foundation, and that is the glue to a community. It's morality and truth, because you can have a strong, you could have a group of guys and your mission is to rob houses, right? You all have the same motivation. You just want all that money. And, you spend time together in fellowship, planning and scheming for evil. But, that may be a successful gang, and they may rack up some money, and they may go break into some houses and steal some stuff. But how effective is that group of guys, is that community?
Right.
Soon it's going to fade away. Soon it's going to fall apart. So there has to be a foundation of morality and truth for all communities to succeed. And that's, I'm talking, community is scalable too, right? Because you got the kingdom of God, and then you can scale that down to like our church, to F3, to family, to our workplace community, to different social circles. But the key underlying factor is, there's got to be morality and truth there. If you get together with a group, if you say for example, you get together with the guys at F3, and they're like, hey, today we're going to mosey on over to the strip club. Like, how do you think that's going to go?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so we have this mission, this oneness, and this fellowship is all tied together through morality and truth.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good distinction too of there are good examples of fellowship and good examples of what this looks like, and then there are examples that were created not to live up to what you're talking about biblically, of biblical fellowship, true community, that idea of true community and true fellowship, and one thing that F3 Nation has done really well at is, so it's not like there's a cookie cutter guy that comes to F3, right? But regardless of there not being this perfect type of guy that we are looking for at F3, because it's open to all men, no matter the man, you are welcomed here. Now, granted, maybe I come to F3 for the first time, and I don't come for the right reasons. Like, that's going to feel foreign to me. Yeah. Just like if I was in a community that is not doing the right things and is not living out true community and fellowship, that would probably feel foreign to me on the outside as well. So how do we do this? How do we build true fellowship, true community within F3, like we've been doing for 5 years now, and especially going into this upcoming year? I guess, what are your goals, thoughts, and kind of mission for how we do this continually with like our second F lunches? That is a huge thing that has been going on for F3 Knoxville for a while. Second F events such as Abridged or getting dinner together. But I think what you're suggesting is there's something deeper, so that morality and truth begs and invites us into something deeper than just, let's go get food together. Right. Let's go grab a beer together, whatever it may be. Yeah. So I think it all starts in the individual, right? The individual has to make a decision. It has to make a decision to say, like, hey, like, I'm going to devote myself to truth, or I'm going to devote myself to goodness and to great and beautiful things in this world. I think once you get that mindset
right. And, as a Christian, I believe, that involves repenting of your sin and turning to follow Jesus, right? Choosing to enter into the kingdom of God, and with that admission, you are given power through the Holy Spirit to participate in the divine nature of God. And 2 Peter 1 talks about that. So that's what I believe. Now, every individual has to make that decision, all right? It starts with the head, and that's what transforms our heart. So we have to decide, like, hey, today I'm going to devote myself to the good and the beautiful, the good, the true, and the beautiful. And
that's good.
And I'm going to, guide my actions. I'm going to, to my best of my abilities, I'm going to choose what is right over what is wrong. So I think that's where it starts. It starts with the decision, with the head knowledge, decision, and then that's got to lead into action. Now, I think in order to be a truly high impact man, we have to scale this idea of community on multiple levels, right? So it's one thing to have strong fellowship and strong community with F3 guys, but let's say we're really involved with F3, we love it, but our family's falling apart, or our church is struggling and they just need some leadership, or maybe your workplace needs strong men to stand up for what is right. So if we neglect our other social circles for F3, then is F3 really fulfilling its purpose in making us high impact men in our community? So we got to use F3 as our recharge time, or as our crucible, where we're tested and pushed to our limits, and where we learn, and then we take those principles and we apply them in our lives to multiple circles of community and fellowship, and then strengthen those circles, and that's how we impact and spread, in my opinion. So
would you say it's fair to say when we do F3, we are actively practicing how to care for someone that we don't even know yet?
Yeah.
Or that we may know that, like, we can pinpoint, hey, my family is really hurting. So, the more I go to F3 and the more I'm surrounded by this good, true community, the more I can use discernment on how to care for them well. Because think back to stagehand, right? Like, when you came to F3, when I came to F3, when all of our F3 guys came to F3, what we do in F3 is we're really practicing this idea of male leadership and an authentic male leadership, like what we would call the high impact man, which also exceeds to women as well, right? Of everything we're talking about is not just centered to men. Right. This fully exceeds to our sisters as well. But I like that idea of when we engage in F3 and fellowship in F3, we are actively practicing for something and someone that we may not know yet that needs us.
Yep.
So F3 is the practicing ground.
That is a good, F3 is where we can go and we can practice, and it's kind of, I don't, the term safe space, but it is a safe space for us to practice leadership. That doesn't mean that we're not going to get, beat up here and there for making stupid decisions in the gloom. But
why would you do 50 Merkin? That's not a warm-up.
It's a place where we can go and get punched around. Yeah. That's what makes it safe.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
It's good because we can learn and we can push each other to grow, and then, like I said, take it outside of F3 and apply those principles.
And part of that is just stepping up and leading. If you've never led before, one, you absolutely have what it takes. Two, you can do it, because if I can do it, you can do it. Trust me. And three, there's something about having men under the sound of your voice where you're responsible for their outcome, and you're responsible for fostering this community, this 45 minutes. You're responsible for fostering this truth and this fellowship for the 60 minutes. You have the men under your voice, right, and under your command, as you would say, and So fellowship in 2021 for F3 Knoxville, for F3 Lexington, for example, for F3 Nation, what does it need to look like?
What does it need to look like? Well, I think it needs to just look like putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, right? So like we said, you just got to step up and do it. There's no waiting around. Oh, maybe, when's a good time to queue? Is it like 3 months in? Is it 6 months in to F3? Like, no, man, just get out there and do it. I did it less than a weekend. And true. It's not because of me. It's like, I think you came up and was like, hey, Saturday's open, you want it? And I was like, yeah. For sure. So I was presented with that opportunity.
Little did I know.
Yeah, little did you know. But also, like, when you're queuing out there, like, you're going to get, if you do something the guys don't like, you'll know about it.
Mumble chatter, right?
Mumble chatter, will speak up. And that's something you also got to learn as a leader, as a man, as a guy in F3, is how to, when you're in a position of leadership, is how to feel it out. Like, hey, maybe I need to adapt on the fly. Or maybe I need to scale it back, or maybe it's too easy. I need to scale it up. For example, my last queue I did last Saturday at the big ball. We get there and there's ice on the ground, and we were going to go from the fountains to the amphitheater. And some guys expressed concern. I was also, of course, going to be careful about it. But some guys were like, "Oh, I don't know." So I was like, "Okay, we're just going to make it a 0 running queue." And we made it to the amphitheater through a series of bear crawls and lunges. And it was also nice for me because it ate up time, and I have to try to make stuff up as much on the fly.
Wow!
So that's just one example of adapting and overcoming, and really feeling out the environment around you and the guys you're leading. So so I think leadership looks like getting out there and practicing it in F3. Get out there, practice it, and then take those principles and practice it in other areas of your life. Yeah, because knowledge unapplied is nothing, is empty. So
and the Bible does talk about this of knowledge not applied is kind of like, what are you doing? It's waste, and like that's where wisdom and discernment comes in as well. Of like, as a Q, you have to discern how you're going to lead like your men for the 45 minutes. Take that outside of F3 as like a man, as a woman, as someone that is hopefully following a trajectory of who God is calling them to be, and using the gifts and talents they are given. Like, you have to discern and have to use wisdom of, how can I impact this person, this group of people, my family, in a better way than I did yesterday.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think as leaders, as high impact men, we got to look at these principles of community, the mission, the oneness, and the fellowship, and we need to keep those in the forefront of our mind. All right, we got to remind our community, whatever that looks like, F3 for example, we got to remind them what our mission is. We got to remind them of our values and of our mindset, and then we also have to encourage fellowship. We have to encourage time together outside of F3, and that's just one example. But I think those three elements, mission, oneness, fellowship. If you're a leader in your community, you have to keep those at the forefront. You have to encourage and keep reminding people of what that is. Because if you don't, people are going to forget. We're prone to forget. Yeah.
Well, Guppy and I talked about this idea of spiritual amnesia last year, and I was like, man, that hit me really hard, just personally as well. But okay, so that probably exists in F3, right? We're 5 years in now, right? We have hundreds of guys that are doing F3 here in Knoxville. We would do CSOPs, we do all these things. Is it possible that we have, or that we can forget our mission of F3? And what do you do when you realize, oh, maybe we've strayed from the tracks a little bit? Yeah. How do we call our guys out to recenter into mission, oneness, and fellowship? And fellowship. Not that we've gotten away from that. I'm not making that point. I'm just saying, if it can happen spiritually, surely it can happen where we get in this comfortable place, this comfortable rotation, that we forget, oh, here is actually our mission. Let's refocus on this. Let's recenter on this more than we have in the past month, year, whatever maybe.
I think there are multiple opportunities to get recentered. I think if we ignore those opportunities enough, it will come as like a slap in the face, as a wake up call. So like you said, I don't think we're anywhere there yet, but definitely the waxing and waning of like sometimes we're on top of it, and sometimes we're not, and that can be different per individuals and different per AOs. And maybe you've seen it, like I don't know, but I know it can happen. Any community, any organization that has been around for more than a day, So I think just keeping those aspects in the forefront of our mind. And then also thinking about ways that we're continuing to grow. So when I think about growth, so I enjoy powerlifting. That's one of my hobbies. So in order to grow, there's different variables you have to manipulate, right? So there's this idea of progressive overload, meaning every session you go into the gym, you are adjusting a variable to add to a stressor in order to allow you to grow, to push you to grow. So one of those, for example, is like intensity, right? Intensity and volume are typically the two big ones. So in the world of powerlifting, it's like how much weight do you move, and then how many times do you move that weight? And there are other variables too. I know some of the like CrossFit guys and some of those higher intensity type people, they'll focus on rest times. They'll focus on time it takes to complete the workout, and those are all variables you can measure and adjust over time. So to keep it simple with the intensity and frequency model, every time I go in to the squat rack, every session I'm adding about 5 pounds to the bar, right? So I may do 300 for 3 sets of 5 this day, and then next week I'm gonna do 305. Next week I'll do 310, and as long as everything else in my life stays relatively consistent, say like I don't pull 3 all-nighters in a row, or I forget to eat for 24, 48 hours. It doesn't happen for me, but it's something, just an extreme example. As long as everything else is relatively consistent and I just manipulate that variable, I'll continue to grow. Same thing with volume, right? So instead of 3 sets of 5, maybe then I go to 4 sets of 3, or like there's just different ways you can manipulate things to grow. And I think in F3 we can apply that knowledge and that principle of progressive overload to say like, hey, like we are growing as an AO, or we are growing as a region, right? We're having this many FNGs, we're planting these new AOs, we're reaching out to other regions and helping them grow. I think it's just continually looking at like how can we push ourselves to the threshold, without falling apart. And like that's gonna be hard because we got to figure out where our limit is. But also it's not likely that this community is gonna fall apart by doing too much, So there's always a push to do more, but it's also not just. So for example, doing more stuff is the volume knob, right? We're doing more reps. But also, we can neglect the intensity. So instead of like doing more, how about we keep doing what we're doing, but do it better? And that's the intensity knob. So like, so maybe at a certain stage, it does look like doing more, planting more AOs, inviting as many FNGs as we can, growing. But, depending on where we're at, and that's really for each AO to feel, and that's really for the region leadership to feel out. It's like, okay, so maybe we don't need to really grow out as much, but we need to dial up the intensity and spend more time and do what we are already doing, but do it better. And those two can both those knobs can turn at the same time, but some maybe in different seasons you're turning one knob more than the other knob. So I think if you think about growth in F3 as a whole like that, then I think it kind of gets you thinking creatively about how to solve problems or how to be preventative, So preventative maintenance.
That's a good word. So what I'm hearing, and you were spot on, is excel in what we have right now, excel in what we know right now, what we are good at right now. And I think sometimes we are caught in this race of, how many FNGs do we have this week? Well, maybe like how many guys really got better this week? How many guys' form just improved tremendously this week? Or who are those guys that showed up twice last week? I mean, they showed up a third time this week, and they were really locked in for 45 minutes rather than maybe they were just locked in for 43 minutes last week.
Or sometimes it looks like we're so focused on the FNG, and it's great to bring in the FNG, but what about that guy that's been there for 4 or 5 years, but recently it's been kind of like he's still showing up, but maybe something's off, something's different. So and it's like maybe growth in that direction means reaching out to that person who's been here for 5 years the whole time. Because we typically don't think about, when we think about fellowship, it's like, oh, we're going to grow our second F, or we're going to grow in the community by bringing more guys in. What about the guys that are already in that just need a little TLC? need a little attention. So
well, and F&G stands for friendly new guy. In case anyone listening does not know what that is, so friendly new guy. Yeah, oh, that's good. Okay, yeah, because we do have guys that have been here for 5 years now, have been here for 4 years now. I mean, 3 years now. I mean, even if you've been here for a year, you have some sense of how F3 operates in the first F, how we operate in the second F, and how we operate in the third F, even being here for a month, right? But for those guys that are 4 years and 5 years, here's a good challenge probably going into 2021. How do we do this better, and how do we stay constant to who we are supposed to be as F3?
Yeah.
You know, gosh, that's good. That's a good reframe.
How do we
right
do
there.
what we do, but do it better?
Yes. How do we do what we do? How do we do it better? Maybe how do we not do it more? How do we do it better?
Yeah, because we're
that's good English, right?
Yeah, we're a culture of more, but sometimes that comes at the expense of doing things better.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going back to good old South Carolina, right? Yeah. And kind of the last thing here, you experiencing F3 in different states and regions, and does fellowship look the same to some degree in every region you've been in so far, or have there been differences that you've been like, well, this is how F3 Knoxville does fellowship, or this is how F3 Lexington does fellowship, or you know, your Colorado Springs guys, like, have you noticed similarities, which hopefully you have, or have there been differences as well as like, hey, we could definitely pull what Colorado Springs is doing because they're crushing it out there, you know, or vice versa for Knoxville or Lexington.
Yeah, I think everybody does do it similar, like in a similar fashion. There's always usually food or drink involved.
Let's go.
Which is always a good like social lubricant, right? You want to bring people in, like put some food out. It attracts flies and friends, I guess.
There we go. Yeah.
So you know that's
good
always
food. Good food. By the way.
Yeah, and also in Acts too, like the early church, they ate together, they broke bread together, and that's so I think that is definitely a common theme I've seen throughout. And as far as like, you know, differences, like there are regional differences, like obviously the people are different, so they have different interests and different tastes and stuff. I think some of the things we did in F3 Colorado Springs was, you know, they go rock climbing together as a second F. I unfortunately was not able to join them on any of those because it sounds like a lot of fun, but Low Country and the boys and Electric Forest, they would go rock climbing as some of their second F. So
that's awesome.
It's just, you know, there's different like regional flavors to F3, and I think that's so awesome because you can learn from each region, each region you visit.
Yeah. So. Oh, that is cool. Okay. Yeah. So when's your next Q?
When's my next Q? To be announced.
To be announced. All right. Well, I will say this: if you have never been under the leadership of a Soot Q or under a Soot bomb or the ball of man encouraging word that the Q shares at the very end, go ahead and mark that down on your calendar as a hardcore to do for 2021. You will not be disappointed. It builds character for sure, man.
Well, now there's a lot of expectation on me now, so I got to deliver. Right?
We had 60 guys show up at Soot's Q last week. But man, thank you for being on. I think it's been a really good conversation and a lot for us to think about, and I think really for me it's more of a challenge of, okay, going into this year 6 of F3 Knoxville, and year 11 really as F3 Nation, or 10. How do we do what we do that we're called to do? How do we do it better?
Yeah.
You know, how do we live more authentically as high impact men inside F3 and outside of F3?
Right. Yeah. The things we looked at today, hopefully, will give you tools to help do our second F better.
Yeah.
You know, we're not trying to invent a fourth F. We're trying to do second F better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, brother, it's been an honor, man. I'm so pumped that we got to finally do this, and
it's fun.
And then, you know, when you come back in town, we'll hear from you again and get under a Soot Q. I've missed the logs, man. I really do.
I'll plan a good one. I don't know if I can get the logs back. We'll do something. Maybe we'll hit up the hills on campus. I know a lot of the guys love running the hills.
There we go. Yeah. Well, like we always do, we do a name-a-rama every single time. So it's where we go around, say our name, your age, and your F3 name. So, my friend, go ahead.
So Daniel Andrews, 25, Soot.
Soot. This is Dan Henson or Daniel Henson 26 Steam.
Steam. All right.
Iron sharpens iron, brother.
Amen.